Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Antony Carpen here in my prison style t-shirt, and this is Vloguary number 3. I've missed the past 3 days because of lack of spoons and just generally being knackered. Now, I was in town earlier on because it's now Monday morning, isn't it? So yeah, I should really be getting off to bed, but before I do, I just want to make this because I'm currently reading this book. It's about John Cornford, who grew up here in Cambridge, and we have, kind of in that part of the neighbourhood that way, a surgery on Cherry Hinton Road called Cornford House. And I was doing a little bit of research actually on John Cornford, who was an anti-fascist fighter who, shortly after he graduated from the University of Cambridge, went over to Spain to fight the fascists in the Spanish Civil War, and unfortunately was one of the first people from England who was actually killed out there, killed in action, while leading his company in an assault on fascist positions, I think it was. And it turns out that the surgery at on the corner of Wolfston Way and Cherry Hinton Road, called Cornford House, was named after his brother. His younger brother Hugh qualified as a doctor, and when he moved back to Cambridge, I think from Devon, in the 1950s, he bought a house just there on the corner of Wolfston Way and set it up as a general practice, and it has remained a general practice ever since then, and it was named after him after he retired, I think in the late 80s, early 90s, which actually would have made him the GP of both my late grandparents, because they moved to that part of town in the late 1970s, actually just before I was born, and that was their local GP, so a little bit of a minor family connection there. One of the really interesting things actually about John here, and you'll see from this photograph and actually a number of others. I found one in with Rachel Ray Peters in the National Portrait Gallery. He's incredibly handsome, actually, but he also died very, very young. It's the similarities between him and the poet Rupert Brooke are actually quite striking, because neither of them made it past their early to mid-20s in the grand scheme of things. I think when Rupert Brooke was 23, he gave a speech all about democracy in the arts to the Cambridge Fabian Society, which I managed to find a copy of because Florence Ada Keynes's younger son, Sir Geoffrey, who was also trained as a medical doctor, actually transcribed it, because he was there and he had the manuscript, and in the 1950s transcribed it. So I gone and scanned it and I've uploaded it to the Internet Archive so you can read it yourselves. And Rupert Brooke, famously, he died, I think, when he was around 27, I think it was, on his way to Gallipoli. He was in the Royal Naval Division under Churchill's command, and Churchill said, actually, this is quite a devastating blow, because I think he had met Rupert Brooke shortly after he was commissioned, and Brooke actually fought in Antwerp in the First World War in a vain attempt to try and save the port from being occupied by the Germans, and the only troops that were going spare were this group of 1,000 soldiers that was basically the private army almost of whoever happened to be the first Lord of the Admiralty at the time, and it just happened to be Churchill who was there. I think Churchill actually wanted to be with them, but it was Rupert Brooke and friends who off they went. As I said, Cornford himself dying around his 21st birthday, I believe. Brooke obviously in his mid to late 20s. Absolutely tragic to think, when you look at some of the writing that they had, how much potential they would have had and what would have become of them, had they survived. Funnily enough, Hugh Cornford, John's younger brother, was active in the CND movement in Cambridge, and so one of his contemporaries would have been Freda Stewart, later Freda Knight, because Frida Knight, when she came back to Cambridge after her husband had retired from a professorship at the University of Reading, she was one of the founder members of the Cambridge Peace Council. And so one of the really interesting things that's happening with the historical research that I'm doing, which actually really excites me in a way, is that I've got a link of the personal relationships of the various people that I'm researching going back to kind of really the 1860s all the way through to the present day, and even some personal relationships that some of my deceased members of my family would have had, which is, I never thought the path of research would go in that direction. So it's kind of, watch this space. Anyway, it's getting late, so I'll see you when I see you.